Welcome to Life Her Podcast, the podcast that guides you from the 9 to 5 grind to the freedom of your own path. Discover how to conquer life's challenges while pursuing your passions with unwavering faith. Because being an entrepreneur is not easy. So let's get to it.
Hey everyone, I am Yvette Lloyd, host of Life Her Podcast. Welcome back to Life Her Podcast. Today we have an extraordinary guest whose life story will leave you inspired and empowered. Mildred Mills is a retired IT exec and author and also a storyteller who has broke barriers, overcome so many challenges, unimaginable challenges. And she was raised as the third of the 17 children on a 60-acre farm of Wekiva, Alabama. Did I
Wetumpka.
pronounce that right?
No, Wetumpka.
Wetumpka. Y'all, I am just so thrilled.
Well, that's not an everyday name, you know.
No, it's not. But Mildred grew up in picking cotton and witnessing the resilience of Black women during the Jim Crow era. You guys, I promise you, you're going to love this interview. It's going to be so insightful and you're going to be educated about so much. So, hey, Mildred.
Hello, Yvette. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm just excited about this because not too many of us know too much of history because, sometimes it's not taught in the places where a lot of people be. And just having the opportunity to interview you and you could just talk about so much. It's very inspiring and I'm honored.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Mildred, your journey began on 60-acre farm as one of the 17 children. Can you share what it's like growing up during the time on how your upbringing shaped your resilience?
Yeah, growing up on that farm was something. In fact, I was the first. I'm my parents' third oldest child, but I was the first one born on that farm. They bought the farm when my mom was pregnant with me, and so I don't know anything else but that farm as a child growing up. But I tell you, I remember being a 5-year-old child in the cotton field barefoot, with my little dress on and picking cotton. And I remember thinking, even at that age, God didn't put me on earth to be a cotton picker. So I just started thinking about, well, how am I going to get off this farm? And of course, I didn't know anything but my parents and but the life that I was living. And you don't know anything else but that life. But I just knew that if I wanted to be a good girl, I wanted to leave with my parents' blessings. And you think about that. Well, why should a little child be thinking about such things? But I also know that, just being resilient means hanging in there and doing whatever you need to do to endure that life that you're living because cotton picking is hard. I don't know if you've ever been to a cotton field,
I
ever
have.
tried to. Okay, well, you know that's not an easy job. It's
No.
extremely hard. And it was my father's farm. So trust me, he was a real serious, that man meant for you to get that work done, and you did it well.
Mm. And you know what's so interesting with you saying when I went and saw it, I was in Georgia at the
Mm.
time, and my friend's parents, their backyard was a cotton field. Their backyard, and they're Mexican.
Mm.
And when I was looking at it, I'm like, and I and it's like really hard to pick off.
It is.
And,
Well, you don't pick it off, you pick it out of because it grows in this thing that's it's a
yeah,
bowl. It's called a bowl, and the thing splits open. And when it splits open, it has these prickly ends. So you
yes,
stick your hands in there, and it actually pricks your cuticles. In fact, after a while, your hands just get used to it because, and of course, your cuticles bleed. It's a tough job. And my father he was a serious taskmaster. So you had to pick a certain amount of cotton or you got a beating. It's as simple as that, So, and I'm not even saying that it was wrong. I'm not saying it was right. I'm saying it is what it was.
Right.
And you did what you were told to do, and I did it to the best of my ability because I wanted to get out of that. I wanted to get out of the South and out of that cotton field and never ever have to show up there again.
Mm, I already know. So you seriously. So with you mentioning and that you grew up in the picking cotton of the family and your farm, what are some of the earliest lessons you've learned from experience, and how did you prepare yourself for the challenges that you'll face later in life?
The thing that prepared me for the challenges that I would face later in life are my two parents. My mother was this loving and very quiet spoken person. And my father he was a businessman. And I tell you what I learned from him was that you do everything you can to the best of your ability. And there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. So work ethic is the thing that got me off that farm, and the thing that kept me out of those kind of jobs, and the thing that opened so many doors for me because, if you I mean, your good looks, we all think we look some kind of way or other, but good looks will only take you so far. And smart talk or the gift of gab will only take you so far. But if you can put your head down and work, and not only just work at what's right there in front of you, but I'm talking about look down the road and see something like, I heard something once that somebody once said, if you want to determine whether you're going to have a good worker or not, drop something on the floor. And when they walk through that door, see if that person is going to pick that thing up or if they're just going to walk across it. So when I walk in, if I see this piece of paper or whatever, I pick it up and say, oh, you dropped something or there's something on the floor. Well, that means I might just go the extra mile.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's that kind of thing. You don't just do what you're asked to do or what you're told to, you just go that extra mile. That has always been my way.
Wow. So your memoir, Daddy's House, touches on setbacks, triumph, and overcoming systematic barriers.
Yeah.
What inspires you to write this book, and why do you think this story needs to be told now?
I think this story needs to be told because, first of all, I think there's a lot of healing in that story.
Mm,
And we all have setbacks. All have things that happen to us that, oh my God, you didn't expect this thing to happen. And sometimes it's through our own doing that these things happen. But the healing I'm talking about is, sometimes, like for instance, I'll say that one of the things that I had a awful thing happen to me as a 19-year-old girl, and it's something that um, many women experience. It was sexual assault, and just to think that who would ever think that and it's usually somebody that or at least somebody that you recognize, and sometimes you are just too trusting. And I think that this story needs to be told because we hide these things. We hide the things that we think are just too painful to talk about. And I think that talking is healing. That silence can be the thing that eats you up from the inside out. That thing that causes ulcers, that thing that causes us to be angry, that thing that causes us to be not our best self. So I think the story is worth telling because not only did awful things happen to me, I had some incredible things that happened. I think about being a young woman at the age, well, being a young girl at the age of 16 and thinking about how am I going to get off this farm and being and winning a trip to California. Where in the world? Whoever thought such a thing could happen to a girl like me? So you share these things with people to say, life might seem a little tough, but sometimes, even on that rainiest day, God throws a rainbow in the sky. So, it just gives you hope and just helps you understand that there is so much more to life than your poor little self. You're feeling sorry for yourself or whatever, but there's somebody who always would love to be in your shoes.
One thing I do, I want to, so I'm so sorry that you went through that. From you going through sexual assault, what did you, how did you feel as far as moving forward in life? And when was that moment when you felt like you had to start healing yourself and choosing you? Because it takes a lot for you to get to this point to want to, write a book about it and even talking about it. Because you say, people do hide things and they don't want to tell their story. And it is so much healing to when you do talk.
You're absolutely right. Yvette, well, I have to say, there is a God, and I was so blessed to be able to lose that memory.
That's
There's this thing that says there's either fight or flight, and I hadn't been on my new job. I had finished my technical education. I had a new job at Ohio State. I hadn't been there a year. I had a new boyfriend. I had all this new stuff in my life. I was this young person who had left the country, had moved to Columbus, Ohio. I'd moved to the city, and when this happened, I prayed and asked God to help me to forget. And I actually lost that memory for more than 30 years. And it
wow.
was while I was writing my book and talking about so many other things that had happened. And I was actually writing a different book and having a conversation with my daughter about my life. I said, I've done so many things in my life, but I've never done anything that caused me to go to jail. And I started talking about these various things and naming these things. And then I heard this sound outside my window, and it was the voice of these Hispanic men. And suddenly this memory just came reeling back to me, and it was the most, I don't know if it was frightening or what happened, but all of a sudden I am bawling. This memory poured out of me just like it was yesterday, and I saw and felt everything that I had experienced just when that memory came back. So that's how I got through life, and Gladys Knight sings this song that's what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget.
Yeah.
And there's protection. Your memory can protect you, and in this instance my memory protected me.
Wow. So that is amazing,
It
honestly.
is.
And just for you to move forward and feel healed and just put it behind you, a lot of individuals aren't as blessed to have those feelings to be able to move forward in life. Sometimes they wear it on them. So I'm so happy that you were able to move forward in life and accomplish many things.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So you became one of the first Black women executives at a major corporation. What were some of the barriers you faced in corporate America, and how did you overcome them?
You know, it's so interesting. I went into a field back in the early 70s that not only did not many women know about it, not many people knew about it. Who knew anything about computers back then? Not
Yeah,
very many people. In fact, I know for a fact that there were probably a couple universities in this whole country that had a computer science degree program. But the bear, I have to say that I started out as a key punch operator. And as a key punch operator, that is the lowest, that was the lowest rung in this IT. Well, back then they called it data processing. But I started out in that area, but obviously something about me attracted that corporation. I was with General Motors Corporation, and I was moved out of that key punch area and moved through the corporation and promoted uh, to these various departments to move me into a corporate American leadership management position. So there might have been barriers, and of course, people say things, but I've just been that person that put my head down and moved my butt forward. you know, uh, yeah, I remember a guy said to me once when I was being moved through these various departments that I was taking a job from a man. He said, "Why are you here taking this job from a man?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, men have to take care of their families. You should be home taking care of your family." I said, "I am a single mother. I also have a job to take care of my family." He told me I should go on welfare. And I
Wow.
said, "Well, why don't you go on welfare?" And you just have to let my mother says, just ignore people. Ignorance is, and I call it ignorance. I don't call the man stupid. I think people say things sometimes because they just don't know any better.
Yeah,
And
they don't.
yeah, they really don't know any better, and you have to forgive some of that stuff, and maybe we can do something to educate these people. But I'll have to tell you, Yvette, a year later, that same man came to me and said, "I apologize to you." He said, "When you got divorced, I thought you were going to be one of those women just like the rest of them, put me in
Yeah.
you find every excuse why you can't come to work. You got it." He said, "But not only did you do your job, you were in here when other people didn't come to work. You were doing our job as well." He said, "So I apologize to you." And I said, "No worries. Didn't bother me whether he apologized or not. I was not there to please that man. I was there to move myself through corporate America and make sure I never ever ended up in a cotton field again."
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me because now it's like men are starting to see how dominant women are, and women are killing it right now.
Well, we
They're
are.
they're getting positions that's normally men have, and it's so crazy that you went through that because my mother, she was a salt truck driver. She drove salt trucks, and she did asphalt. She used to lay down asphalt, and she knew how to work any type of heavy construction machine and all of that. And
Oh
men
my
used to
gosh.
hate it that she was on that job all the time. But women are doing men jobs, as they say. They're doing it, and sometimes they can even do it even better.
Yeah, the thing that I said to my first husband, I remember saying to him, "I'll work the hell and back with you, beside you, but I won't fight for you. I mean, I'm not. If you want to take a hike, you go right ahead." And at the end of the day, I said, "We can work side by side, and we can do so much more and go so much farther working together," because he had also said to me that I should stay home and take care of a child. I said, "Well, I don't, that child's going to grow up someday and leave us, and then, you know, I feel like there's more value for me to go out of this house and work." I mean, I wanted to work. I loved my children, really, really loved my children, but I just wasn't fulfilled by just sitting home taking care of a child.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, I'm glad you are like an extremely strong woman because it's like it seems like whatever hits you, you gonna speak up for yourself and you gonna let them know. Like, look, no.
Yeah, I don't want to hurt anybody. I am here to help. I'm here to be a partner. I'm not here to try to run things. I'm not here to try to have people run over me. I want to be a partner. I want a partner in this thing called life. Not
Uh-huh.
somebody. I'm not here to dominate or be dominated. So, yeah. And speaking up, yeah, that kind of comes with this territory.
Wow. So, as a Black woman breaking into spaces where you weren't always belonged or welcome, what advice you could give to women of color navigating their own professional journeys today?
Just be yourself. I don't say be an angry person. I don't see any reason to be angry. Just do your absolute best. Be your beautiful, lovely, wonderful self. And they'll see just how
Mhm.
wonderful you are. You if you're in that room, you obviously bring something to the table. So show them what you bring to the table. And I just encourage women of all colors. I mean, black women, I encourage anybody, just be your own strong self. And just you don't have to tell anybody how wonderful you are. Show them.
Yep.
My mom always said, another thing my mother said is, you can show them better than you can tell them. Because usually when you're talking, sometimes people aren't listening anyway. But when it's this thing they say about children, so they might not remember what you said, but they absolutely remember what you did. And
Mm,
Maya Angelou said, I think it was she who said, people might not always remember what you said, but they always remember how you made them feel.
yes.
So if you walk into this room and you are this person, you got an attitude, and everybody, you're smarter than everybody in the room, and on and on and on. Well, who wants to hear that? But if you come in, you're a team player, you know, I'm a farm girl, so I can tell you that cream always rises to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You ain't lying.
yeah.
So, you purchased your first home on your own at the time when women's financial independence was uncommon. What did that moment symbolize for you, and how did it change the course of your life?
If I told you that I didn't have a clue that all of these things had happened the year before, I keep saying ignorance is bliss, because I remember that day like it was yesterday. I had I had just came out of divorce court, and I had no intentions of buying a home because I hadn't saved any money to buy a home. But to make myself feel better, I picked my little girl up from daycare and I went driving through this neighborhood. It was so beautiful. The homes were, I thought, well, one of these days I'll be able to afford one of these places, and I'll have a swing in the backyard for my daughter, and so forth and so on. And so as I rode through this neighborhood, there was a stay for sale sign in one of those yards. And I thought, wow, that must be a sign. So I took the number and I bugged the heck out of that realtor, just kind of asking questions because, like I said, I didn't have any money anywhere to buy a house. But then when I told my landlord about, I said, I'm thinking about purchasing a home. And he told me that nobody was going to, I said, you're not going to buy a house because nobody's going to loan you the money. You won't qualify. And I thought, well, I'm going to show you. So, hey, next thing you know, less than 6 months later, I mean, I started right then. Actually, it was, yeah, June, July, August, 4 months later, I owned that house. And I did not realize until much later that the year before, a woman couldn't even get a credit card in her name.
Wow.
We had just that Equal Credit Act hadn't even been passed, but a year earlier. So, and I remember my girlfriend coming to visit me. She lived in California at the time, and she said, "I can't believe you bought a house. I didn't know a woman could buy a house." I said, "I didn't know a woman couldn't buy a house." So it was just one of those things where sometimes it helps not to know what people expect that you can't do,
That's
because then
true.
you just march forward, and like I said, just being ignorant sometimes is okay.
Mhm.
Just put one foot in front of the other one, and you just never know where you might end up.
Yeah, yes. In your journey, as far as in your career, what was the moments when you ever felt like giving up, and what kept you going during those difficult times?
I've never really felt like giving up because it's just not in my DNA to give up. But I can
Girl.
honestly tell you that when I first separated from my husband, my first husband, I'm in my second marriage, and there won't be any more. That I there won't be any more. But I remember we were in debt, and I was like 25, 24, 25 years old, 2023 when we separated, and there was a lot of debt, and I was the only one working really, and actually he had just gotten a job, and we'd been married for 3 years, and so I decided to take. We had a furniture bill, and I had a car note, and of course I had to pay rent, and my attorney said to me, "Make your husband take that furniture bill." I said, "Now I'm not going to do that because he doesn't even pay his bills. So why would he pay?" I said, "I need my furniture." So anyway, he said, "You guys should split up the bills." I didn't split up the bills. So while I'm at work, of course, I called these bill people and said, "Look, I am getting a divorce and I won't be able to pay yada yada yada." But and they all made arrangements with me except this one person, and this person called me and harassed me on my job. And I tell you what, I was terrified, and I was hoping that I wouldn't lose my job, because back then, you think about it, back in the early 70s, the phone calls came to an office and they had to come out and get you, and you weren't supposed to be
Yeah.
talking on the phone. And these people knew that you had debt and so forth and so on. They could have fired you. So I never felt like giving up, ever, ever, ever. I never felt like giving up on any job. There was a time late in my career when I did experience a really nasty incident at work, and I ended up suing my employer. And at that time, I became very ill. And while I was ill, I never went back to that job. So,
Man,
but I took a different path, and here I am.
man. And you here too.
Yes, I am. Here I am. I never ever thought that I would fall or falter. I might have walked away from something, but I always had something to walk to.
Wow. So faith is also an often reoccurring theme in stories of resilience. How has your faith guided you through life hardships and triumph?
I have faith. There is a Bible verse that says, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, how much you can accomplish. And I have had to have faith, because without it, I mean, it's just like it's like a garment for me. I get up every morning and put it on, because when I get up every morning, I believe that there is a God, and that God is protecting me in everything that I do. And that faith also tells me that I can accomplish anything. I can do anything through God who strengthens me. And I had to have faith, because I think about being a divorced woman with two little kids and thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
But, I never wondered how I was going to do it. I got up every day and went to work and made it happen. But I remember when I left home as a girl of 18 years old, and my mother stood there in the pitch black crying and telling me to trust in the Lord with all my heart and lean not on my own understanding. And she said, in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. So she told me just to believe. And I always believed. And I saw my mother suffer through some things that I wouldn't want anybody to suffer through. And if she could have that kind of faith just drove me. It took me places. And I don't know how not to have faith. I don't know how not to believe. So,
Uh, you know, it's it's so crazy like just talking to you, and it makes me think of like today's generation,
mm,
and it's just so different. And it's like sometimes they, the young women, they took away their morals and respect, and the fact that, I feel like now sometimes some of them want more of a praise of being a mother,
Mm-hmm.
more of the attention when these are things you're supposed to do because you're a mother, or they look for the man to do so much for them or financially. And, it's just so many different things. And I watch my grandmother and my mother and everyone and how they maneuvered as a woman being a single parent. You know, Mildred, my mom haven't complained not one time.
Mm.
I've never heard her complain. I never heard her like just needing a man in the home or just needing them overalls. She did yard work, everything. She was doing it all. Right when she got off work, she'd come and do yard work. And just even her not keeping me out of her adult business
Mm.
and let me be a child and let me learn things on my own as I grow up, but still teaching me different things around the house. And it's like it's so missed in today's society. How do you feel about how you see how certain women are carrying themselves today?
I love that. I love what you just said about your mother and how she managed the house and how she managed that house as a single mother and how she taught you, even though, I mean, taught you, allowed you to be a child, even though, rather than putting you, making you this little adult woman. What I see is a lot of young people, not just young women, and young women especially, they want their children to be their friends. They want to say, "Hey, baby, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that," and they have these children all up in their adult business, and not only do they expect, well, some of them don't even expect just men to take care of them. They think that their parents, their grandparents, and all these people owe them something. And they expect that just because they have a child and, well, they might be struggling a little bit. Well, you seem to have this or you seem to have that. And they don't care about how you feel. They don't care that you're busy. They don't care that you have a life, and they don't care that you've already raised your family and all these kind of things. So that is one thing that is troubling to me. um, and you're absolutely right. I did any and everything to make sure that my children didn't have to sit around worrying about whether or not they would be food, clothing, and shelter. My
Mhm.
parents didn't. I didn't have to worry about food, clothing, and shelter. I said to somebody said, "Well, you grew up kind of poor." And I thought, well, I never thought I was poor. We didn't have what I don't even know what other people had because there were so many of us. And I said I was cold sometimes growing up, but I never missed a meal in my life. And
Yep.
even to this day, I haven't missed a meal. I've never
Yep.
been hungry in my life.
And that's wealth.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to
Well,
be said about that. My parents took care of us. They made sure that they provided the bare necessities, the basics that you needed, and every now and then you got something that you wanted. And I did the exact same thing for my children. But to your point, there are people in this world, some of these young folks who absolutely think that, well, somebody owes them something, and they treat their children like trophies rather than children. Well, they dress them up and then don't have a clue that, well, you're supposed to be nurturing this child, teaching them that rules apply to you, and teaching them that you need to be in bed at a certain time. I
yeah,
need to get you up at a certain time. I need to teach you how to do this. I need to teach you how to do that. I need to
yeah,
teach you how to say thank you. I
yeah,
need to teach you how to, well, why are you sitting in that chair when you can get up and get your own this, that, or the other? But so
yeah. They got
that's what I think about it.
they got, they got tablets now, Mildred. They got tablets.
Yes.
So it's just so crazy because it's just so different. Because we had a bedtime. Well, I had to be in bed by 9 o'clock,
Yes.
and my mom will say the kitchen is shut down at 8.
Not only did the kitchen shut down at 8, you ate what was, well, I know in my house, you ate what was prepared. Some of
Yes,
these young folks,
you
well, I
not
don't like
telling me
that.
you're not telling me what you want to eat.
Oh,
You want
no.
what I give you.
This is what's for dinner. You eat it or not, you know?
Yeah. And, it's just so crazy because it's just, I don't know. It's like I'm 41.
Mm,
So it's like it's kind of like my generation and the kids that they had. It's like a lack of parenting there because my generation, our parents was on us.
mm.
We had a village. We had people that were able to tell us right from wrong, even strangers. No,
Yes.
you don't do that. But it's like I always heard like so many of my like associates and stuff. When I have kids, I'm not treating my kids that way. I'm not doing this. And now look at them. They all jacked up.
Oh yeah. That's the crazy thing. Now see, you're my son's age. My son is 40. But I remember and my daughter is older. She's 12 years older than my son. But I remember when I would get the complaint, from a child that said, "Well, you're such and such." I said, "Listen, I'm doing the best I can. And I tell you what, if God blesses you to have your own little children when you're an adult, you be that perfect mother that I'm not, because I'm not
Mhm.
perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect, but I am doing my absolute best." So I haven't seen anything, heard anything about them perfect little children. And I remember my daughter saying I think she said she wasn't going to spank her children, but now she pop, pop. Oh, you're going to pop, pop somebody, huh? And my
Yeah.
son doesn't have children, but yeah, you're absolutely right. They came up in a different home in my house. And yeah, they got some pops, all right. Yeah. Discipline is so important in a home. It
It
really, really
is.
is. But we want to just some of these, we want to sit around and negotiate with these children. I'll negotiate with them, all right.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know it. So, what legacy do you want to leave behind Daddy's house, and how do you hope your story inspires future generations?
The thing that I want that story to do more than anything is to allow people to speak about things that are hurtful and things that they've been holding in. I want this story to be one that heals. If it heals anybody half as much as it healed me as I wrote it, I will have accomplished a lot. Yvette, I read some of the reviews that people have left for this book, and it just warms my heart because, when you write a story and you put it out there for the world, you don't know what the world is going to say about it. You don't know how it's going to be received. But when I take a look at some of those reviews and they say you were so brave and you had to be so vulnerable to tell that story. I didn't know that I was being vulnerable. I was just telling a story because I thought, these things have been on my heart and on my mind. And I never ever thought about writing a book. But when I decided to write it, I decided to just write the truth, tell the truth, and I couldn't imagine writing a book where, oh my God, everything was just so wonderful, jolly, happy. And it's just everybody was beautiful. Everybody was wonderful. I didn't have any bad experiences, nor could I imagine writing a book that was so horrible. You had such a horrible life that would be depressing. But you just wrap that all up together and you put it together. And I had friends that said, you just put it all out there, didn't you? I said, I absolutely did. And so my legacy, I hope, is that, well, not only will my children know that I was here, my grandchildren will, my great grandchildren, and generations to come will know that Mildred J. Mills lived. And she not only lived, she did something while she was living. And she left us in fact, I interviewed my granddaughter on my podcast. And she said, some days I get up and I think, it's in your DNA. You need to do better. And she said, after reading my grandmother's book, I know that I've got some good stuff in my DNA. And I said, oh my God. So, think about that for my granddaughter to say that to me. And my son said something similar. I mean, he just said, just to see, he said, that book humanized you. I
Mhm.
had always seen you as mama, this person that always had it together. And I never thought you went through anything. He said, but oh my goodness,
Yeah.
that book humanized you. So,
Yeah. And that's like amazing for you could that's like you having a closed book and you just looking at the cover until you open it, you hear something totally different.
oh
And
yeah.
a lot of times people misjudge many individuals that just have so much wisdom in them. They carry things differently. But the way you wrote your book and you just let everything free, it should give a lot of people a lot of enlightening and knowing that anything is possible.
Yes. It should allow people in fact, I've had people, the thing that I absolutely love is these women. In fact, it's only been women to this point who have invited me to their book clubs. They chose my book, read my book, and invited me to their book club. And those are some of the most amazing, wonderful discussions they talk about. And there's some who've said, you have given me permission to write my story. And some of these people have said, I've just been afraid to say some of these things because I don't know what my family will think. And I said, I love my family and I know that my family loves me, but that they don't get to give me permission to write my story. They
Yeah.
don't get to give me permission to tell my story. I mean, this is my story, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. And if anybody can stand up and tell me that anything in that book is not true, you do that. But I don't believe that you can. In fact, it was so beautiful, Yvette. I went back to Wetumpka, Alabama. They invited me, this library invited me for a talk and to sell books. And I have these older cousins. These ladies are in their 80s, and they're my parents' nieces. But because both my parents were the youngest of very large families. But this one woman said to me, she said, I read that book. She said, oh my God, it was such a wonderful book. She said, and you know why I read it? I read it to see if you told the truth. And she said, you told the truth. In fact, she said, I have some more things that you could have put in that book. I said, oh, okay. Well, then you tell your story.
That is hilarious.
I thought
That
it
is
was pretty
amazing.
funny.
Yes, it is. It's just so like back then, as far as like as we elevate women and their voice and highlighting racial justice today, what advice did you give to those that are fighting for change?
Just keep fighting. I mean, don't stop. And I mean, even if you get angry, I think fighting with humility. I'm not going to say Dr. King was always right or his way was the only way, but just think about the strength that that man had to have. And it isn't just Dr. King. I look at my father. My father was born in 1921. He was a black man who grew up in Jim Crow's South. And what did he have to go through? I don't know what he had to go through, but I never saw my father out. Now, he was something else in that house sometimes, but I never saw my father. My father carried himself in a way that almost demanded respect. When you saw that man, you just kind of, and people say that same thing about me sometimes. They say, well, you just care, and they say, you never would have known that some of these things occurred in your life by the way you carry yourself. But my mom also said, people like to see you with a hung down head and looking sad and sorry. She said, when you walk outside that door, walk with your head up, walk with your back straight. And people don't have to know. One of her sayings was, people don't, I said something about being hungry or not liking what I had eaten. She said, nobody knows what's in your stomach by looking at it. And I thought, well, there's something to be said about that. Nobody knows what's going on in your life unless you show it or tell it. So,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, regardless of what weight is on your shoulder, carry it and carry it with grace.
Yes, definitely. For anyone who feels stuck in life, whether due to systematic barriers, trauma, self doubt, what would you say to encourage them to keep going?
Work hard. In fact, I have a podcast, and the premise of that podcast is regardless of where you were born in life, regardless of your station in life, you can change your circumstances if you're willing to work for it. Work hard. Don't tell anybody how hard you're working. Just keep working and don't work for somebody else. Work for yourself. Work for yourself. Work just to make sure that you are bettering yourself, not somebody else. I
Mm,
just say work hard. That's my thing.
yes, it is.
That's my thing. Work hard. Even at this age, my son said to me, he said, "These are your golden years." He said, "Do you think that you'll ever stop working?" I said, "Well, when I stop working, you will know that I have probably been buried." Or I have
Mhm.
stopped breathing. So yeah,
Yeah. I don't think people understand. Like, they may want you to sit down and rest, but you got to keep going too at the same time
yeah,
and
I
do.
yeah, you can rest while you work. You just have to
Yeah.
be you know, I have things that I want to do. I'm working on a children's book. I had started writing a book before I finished this book. I am working on mental health coaching certification. I have things that I think that I think I still have tremendous value, and I think that I still can give a lot to this life that I live and the people that I encounter in my life. So I'm just going to keep doing what I do.
Yes. So, where can listeners find your book and how can they connect with you and continue learning from your story?
Now, people can find my book on either, actually, if you just Google the book name, it just comes up in all kinds of places. It's
Yeah.
being distributed by Ingram Spark, and I know that the main places I thought it was only at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But if you Google Mildred J. Mills or Daddy's House, a daughter's memoir of setbacks, triumphs, and rising above her roots, you'll find that book in many places. And you know what I would love if people would, when they read the book, leave me a review. Please. The reviews really matter. That help get you noticed. And
Yeah.
then also, I am on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm also on LinkedIn. And they can find me at Mildred J. Mills. That's Mildred. J is my middle name, and Mills, Mills, Mildred J. Mills.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So, what final words of wisdom would you like to leave with our audience today?
I'd just like to leave with this audience that I am so happy to have been able to sit here and speak with the lovely Yvette. And I hope that there is something that I said that will brighten your day. And the words of wisdom are just keep getting up every day, putting one foot in front of the other. Don't worry about what anybody thinks about you, says about you, or any of those other kind of things. Love yourself.
Yes, that is so important.
Yeah, it is. And I forgot to mention that I do have a podcast, and it is my cotton patch moment. And that it means, there's that aha moment when you think, oh my God, there's something that I should be doing. Should I
Yes.
keep going down this path, or do I need to stop and do something different?
Mm-hmm. Podcasting, I encourage a lot of people to start it. It's like a diary.
It is like a diary. And you know what? The good thing is, if you're doing a podcast and you don't like the way it's going, or you can always change, you can do
Yeah.
something different. Like I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing this podcast right now and it's going on for so much. but I'm thinking I might do something shorter, do snippets and do video and
Yeah.
just do a little message every now and then. So we'll see. But podcasting is good. It's journaling and it's an outlet to get those things out there that you might want to say but once you say it, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
You sure can't. It's gonna be there stuck.
Yeah, it is.
So basically, make sure you tell the truth.
Oh, make sure you're telling the truth and make sure you're not getting yourself in trouble
Oh my
by whatever
God.
you say, right?
Yes, that is so true. That is
Yeah.
very true. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you for being on my podcast show. I enjoy every moment of it.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed being with you, and I appreciate you inviting me to be your guest.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to Life Her Podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube and also listen to us on all audio major platforms and have a blessed day.
Welcome to Life Her Podcast, the podcast that guides you from the 9 to 5 grind to the freedom of your own path. Discover how to conquer life's challenges while pursuing your passions with unwavering faith. Because being an entrepreneur is not easy. So let's get to it.